Hello everyone and welcome to another 3D Buzz video. This video is going to be a quick demonstration of the new CGS language that has been developed to aid in styling our GUIs in Unity-based games. Primarily the MMO, though we have used it in RuneSlinger and we will continue to use it with other games in the future. Now, for those of you that are students in the MMO class, we will begin recording how to put this new language together, starting at square one, where we're going to be talking about lexers and parsers, etc., all the way through to the very completion, where you will then be able to build out and drop DLLs into your Unity-based project, and then write, well, a CGS file, which is very similar to CSS, which Nelson will be explaining in just a second. But you'll be able to write that, and it will aid you in styling the way that your graphical user interface looks, and it will make doing so completely painless, as opposed to how it is right now. So this video is really intended for our MMO students, but I decided to go ahead and put it together for everyone. We did do a radio show this past January the 6th where we had a live webinar, and Nelson demonstrated the language to those that were in the radio show or had joined into the radio show and were able to watch live. And I had made a promise during the show that we would re-record this presentation and put it back up for everyone else that was not able to attend the show live. So that's what we're going to do here. So Nelson, give us a little bit of history about CGS. So where did it come from, the idea of putting this together?
Well, CGS is mainly two things. And when I was building out the UI for RuneSlinger, I noticed two big problems with the way that the GUI layout class in Unity works. We'll be talking about the first one a little bit later when I can show you some code examples, but the biggest issue was that the way that you style individual GUI elements was particularly annoying. It required that you navigate a clunky user interface under the inspector. It required that it gave you limitations such as not being able to style or select large swaths of elements for styling. It didn't allow you to copy and paste custom styles. It didn't allow you to even reorder custom styles in a way that made sense. So you were stuck with this really obnoxious list of, I think it was like 48 custom styles that I had on one screen alone. And it became very difficult to navigate, very difficult to maintain, and it was just a pain to write. So I wanted to come up with a way to represent a GUI style textually. And well, this is actually kind of a solved problem right now because CSS over the last decade has pretty much solved the ability to select elements and to style them with properties in a very standard, very well-known, and very efficient manner. So I built CGS out of it as basically originally as just a CSS engine, but I did add some additional features to the language itself, which we'll see a little bit later on.
So basically, CGS, Cascading GUI Sheets, is heavily based off of the standardized cascading style sheets.
Yes, the syntax looks very similar, although, like I said, there's a few extensions. And the reason for that was, well, first of all, familiarity. I'm sure many of you have used CSS, and if you haven't, there are many, many tutorials on how to use it online. And it is a very even people, when we're doing the presentation, who hadn't used CSS before, they were seeing things just that day for the first time and saying, wow, this actually, makes sense. I can read this style and read it in a lot more efficient way than navigating the inspector.
Right. Okay, now, real quick, we do probably have people out there that are watching this video thinking that, all right, well, Unity 3.5, it's now out in beta, and while there's been no sign of the new GUI system that they have, it's rumored, well, at least it was originally rumored to be with Unity 3.5, and maybe it will make it, maybe it will not, but we do know coming up very soon that we will have a completely redesigned GUI system in Unity that's going to make life easier. Well, when that actually happens, is this going to make CGS obsolete?
Well, that's a great thing about CGS, and if you add in the fact that there are many GUI things out there, GUI components, and different ways to create GUIs, what I wanted to do, in addition to the fact that Unity was going to change the way that they do GUIs, or at least it's rumored. I wanted to make CGS fairly decoupled from Unity's layout engine. So although CGS currently is built on top of Unity's layout engine, the code that actually glues CGS to Unity is very, very small and very compact and very easy to change depending on what sort of thing you want to use CGS for. I mean, that even includes taking the CGS DLL, dropping it in a non-Unity project, and still using the same syntax for other purposes.
Fantastic. So basically everything that we're going to be demonstrating as far as building this language, this will be something that's not going to go obsolete once the new GUI system's out. We'll just simply adapt it for that particular system and continue on business as usual, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so give us a demonstration. Start out with some simple stuff. Give us a hello world type demo.
All right, so I am in a Unity project that I just created from scratch. The scene's not even saved out on it yet. I'm going to go ahead and do that now, first of all. And yeah, of course, it's not going to do that. Okay, so we have our scene saved out. The next thing you have to do to include CGS is you have to drop in a few different DLLs, just two. And I'm going to go ahead and drop them in from off screen. You have the cgs.unity and log4net. I could have internalized log4net. However, I wanted you to be able to, or the consumers of this library, to be able to use their own version of log4net that they already have, that they might already have in their project. So if you don't have log4net, go ahead and drop this in. If you do have log4net, just drop in the cgs.unity.
Okay, now I'm sure that we've got people right now wondering, is this only going to work with Unity Pro?
No, this will work just fine in standard.
Okay.
The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into my project settings, and I'm going to go ahead and not go into that one. I'm going to go in a different one somewhere.
Down to our player.
Player, yes. I was going to go in player. I'm going to turn on run background, and you'll see why that's important in a second. It's not that isn't required for CGS, but it is helpful for CGS development. If for some reason you don't want something to run in background, you can still uncheck this before you do a build. Mm-hmm. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and create a views folder, and I'm going to create a C# file called view test. I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio.
And while this is taking a moment to open up, I'll go ahead and tell everyone that the DLL, the CGS.Unity DLL that you drug into the project, that's what we're going to be teaching everyone in the MMO class how to build.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have this one game object here. And just like with the relationship between HTML and CSS, if you're familiar with those technologies, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to build your structure. Build the structure of the GUI. And so I guess that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. Basically, what you're going to see here is a custom sort of DSL I built into C# itself using, well, you can use lambdas if you wish, but I built the system that just basically delegates back into GUI layout. So there's analogs between everything that you're about to see and GUI layout. It does, of course, actually add in the CGS capabilities into it. Now what you do is you start off with CGS GUI.build. And this method takes in a delegate that has one parameter of an iCGS GUI builder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a lambda with that parameter assigned to the G variable that you see right there. Now the G variable is accessible from this entire lambda. So I'm going to go ahead and if you look at the methods on it, you'll see, if you're familiar with HTML, you'll see a lot of familiar things. You know, you have the H1 through H6, HDivs for horizontals, VDivs for verticals, scrolls for scrolls, span, strong, text, type, so on and so on. I'm going to go ahead and start off with something relatively simple. I'm going to just do a g.h1 and write a hello world. So what this is going to do is this is going to instruct CGS to print out a GUI layout.label with the content of Hello World. And now what's important and what you don't see is that CGS is actually going in and calculating a GUI skin or a GUI style that's going to be applied to that label. And it does it based off of a variety of different criteria. For example, the element type, which is H1 in this case. So now if I go back to Unity and run this, you will see...
Well, we might want to drag that over onto our camera, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, if you wanted this
If
to
you
work.
really want it to work, yeah.
I actually closed the window that I needed to do that with. That was stupid of me. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this game object onto the main camera. And if you run this, you'll see Hello World, standard GUI layout, label, and all that stuff. So at the moment, it's very straightforward. Now we're going to go ahead and actually add a CGS file, and we're going to style that element in, well, any way that we want to. This would be analogous to if you were to create a GUI skin inside of your project and set it up to be used in your onGUI method. So I'm going to go ahead and create another folder called Styles. Inside Styles, I'm going to create a resources folder. The way CGS works at the moment is that it will load the CGS files through the resources.load method, which, if you're not familiar with it, requires that it is at some point in a folder called resources. Then I'm going to go ahead and show this in Explorer. The reason I'm doing that is because Unity doesn't have a template for CGS, obviously. I'm going to create a new text document, and I'm going to call this styles.cgs. Now, before I actually load this up in the editor and start editing it, I have to load this into the runtime. CGS has to have a way to know that I want the styles from this file. And to do that, all I have to do is, in some point, I'm going to do this in the awake method. You have to do CGS environment instance load style sheet. And then I'm going to pass in the name, which is styles.cgs. So at this point, I can go ahead and run this project, and then I'm going to go ahead and open this CGS file in my text editor. Now, I'm using a text editor called E, and the reason I am is because the closest language to CGS at the moment is a language called Less. Less is a language that's an extension to CSS if you're not familiar with it. You can use a normal CSS editor, but I'll show you why a normal CSS editor might start blowing up in a second. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, remember that Hello World is an H1. So just like CSS in HTML, I can still go ahead and say, style the H1 element. We want to give it a red color.
Very nice.
Then we want to give it a padding of 5, a background of white, and, well, I don't know, a font of 20 points.
Awesome.
Then we want to have it stretch across the width of the screen.
Very cool.
So you see that you can just really quickly get instant feedback, because when CGS is used inside the context of an editor, it'll actually watch the file for changes. So every time I hit save, Control S, you saw that the GUI immediately applied the new styles in this style sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's just everything about this versus using a GUI skin is significantly nicer and, well, just easier to do, because it's really just text. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up a little bit more complex example. I'm going to start off with doing the structure first, and then I'll add in the styles.
Okay.
So I'm going to change the structure a little bit. I'm going to put it inside a vdiv. Now, here's an interesting thing about some of these methods, particularly the vdiv, hdiv, and scroll methods, is they have these overloads that accept these iElement properties. For convenience, there's one overload that accepts no properties, one overload that accepts 1 or 2 properties respectively, and one overload that accepts a enumerable of iElement properties. Now, an iElement property, just like an HTML property, is a way to set the ID and the class of an element. So I can go ahead and say pass in g.cls, and I'll call this page wrap. And now I'll pass in my lambda as the action. So the equivalent code inside of here for GUI layout would be a GUI layout.begin vertical and a GUI layout.end vertical. And so as you see, you're already saving quite a bit of typing. And not only that is you can use the attributes and the element types in order to uniquely identify each individual element that you want to style. So then I'm going to go ahead and add an H1 for hello world. And you'll see also the methods that do not take in a delegate, they will have a params iElement property array, so that you can also set the ID or the class of any of the other elements as well. Then I'm going to go ahead and start out another vdiv. Then I'm going to start out an hdiv. And then I'm going to open up a vdiv. And this vdiv is going to be a column. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the class of column and pass in the delegate. The delegate is just going to contain an h2. So g.h2, and then I'll call this column 1. And then I'm going to create column 2 and column 3. Further, I'm going to go ahead and add multiple classes to each one of these columns. So they will be selectable with the column class, but I'll also be able to select them individually via column 1, column 2, and column 3. So this is going to be the structure, and again, if you are a web developer, this is the HTML of the project. Looks very similar, and is, I think, a lot more easy to understand than the GUI layout.begin and end methods or family of methods, particularly considering that when using those with custom GUI styles, you have to pass in like a new instance of GUI style selected by name, and if the name's wrong, it's null and throws an exception, and it's just a mess. With this way, all that stuff is hidden for you. CGS builds the styles. You just have to provide the structure and the style sheet. So now that I have the structure set up, I can go ahead and run the project again. And you'll see that we have the H1 that's already styled at column 1, column 2, and column 3. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the styles that will actually make this look a lot nicer. First of all, I'm going to add the page wrap style, which I am selecting an element by a class, and that class is page wrap. I'm going to give page wrap a width of 100% and a height of 100%. This means that the page wrap will now fill the screen. So if I were to, for example, give it a background of E, you'll see that it fills the entire screen now. Next, I'm going to style. I'm actually going to move this style. And watch what happens when I move this. If you are unfamiliar with less, but familiar with CSS, this is going to make you very happy. Now, you notice nothing changed, but technically something did. Basically, now that this is a nested rule inside of this rule, this H1 selector will only select if this selector or all of its parent selectors also select the element. So this essentially becomes .page-wrap space H1. So it's a way to save a lot of typing. And this is where some CSS editors will start complaining, which is why I recommend using a less editor, because less, like I said, supports this feature. So now I'm going to go ahead and add some column styles. And in my columns, I want my columns to have a padding of 5 pixels. So now you see that columns now have a padding of 5 pixels. I'm going to go ahead and want them to have a border right of 1 pixel black. So now you see they have a border right of 1 pixel in black.
And if you wanted to make that extend all the way to the bottom?
Yep, I would have to do a width and a height of 100%. And you'll see now that they're filling the entire screen.
Sweet.
So now I'm going to go ahead and inside of each column, I'm going to add an H2 selector. So remember, this isn't a global H2 selector. This H2 selector will only select an element if it's also a parent of an element with the class of column, which is also going to have to be a parent or have a parent with the class of page wrap. So in my H2, I'm just going to give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels, and you'll see why in a second, because I kind of wanted to give a little bit of extra space. So now, this is cool, I guess. We can make this look a little bit nicer if I added like a border bottom of 5 pixels black right there. Maybe give it a padding bottom of 10 pixels to offset that, or maybe like 7 pixels. There, that looks good. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's interesting. So far, you see that we can do things that we previously couldn't with the existing system, because now we can select individual H2s that are under, for example, we can select individual H2s that are under a particular hierarchy. If I wanted to, I could give a default H2 style that would apply to all H2 styles, but this H2 style would overload it, which is a huge time saver when you're dealing with a lot of very similar but not exactly similar elements. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and throw in a button on each one of the columns, and that's done with the g.button. And you'll notice that the g.button method does return a Boolean, so if you wrap it in an if statement, it will behave just like the GUI layout.button method. We go ahead and add it to each one of the columns. And I'll jump back over to Unity, restart the project because I have to recompile the code, obviously. So now you see that we have 3 buttons, and these buttons are pretty much unstyled. So now I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can style buttons. So I'm going to start the buttons off with background. So now you see every button has a background. This is also, I failed to mention this actually while I was putting together everything, but setting a background color and setting a border, a specific border, is currently impossible with the current Unity system. What my system does is actually, depending on the background property and the border property, it'll actually go out and generate a texture.
I was about to say it's not important. I mean, it's not impossible. It's a matter of.
Oh, it's a matter of great amounts of work.
Well,
because
you got to make. Well, go ahead and explain what you got to do.
Yeah, because you have to make a new texture for every combination of background, border size, and border color that you want. With this system, it takes care of that all for you because it generates these textures behind the scenes. It also caches them in memory, so it's not like it's regenerating these textures on every frame. So that's a very, very, very convenient thing when you really just want a solid color. And of course, I also support transparency in the background. So if you do RGBA, you could do like 255, 255, 255, and then 50. And now you see that it's a slightly transparent background.
Nice.
But I'm going to go back to using this. I'm going to give it a border, 2 pixels, with a little kind of black color. And then give it a padding of 5 pixels, give it a font of 12 points, give it a text align of middle center, then give it a width of 100%. So now you see we have a few fairly decent looking buttons without having to create a single texture.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll notice a problem. They don't have any interactivity. And here's another thing that my system allows you to do that's previously impossible with the current GUI layout system. I'm going to go ahead and add a hover pseudo selector, and I'm going to give it different properties. Now, here's the cool thing. With the current way that Unity supports hover and active states, you cannot change anything but the foreground text color and the background color on a hover state. With this system, you can change any of the properties that you have available by default. So what I'm first going to do is when you press a button, when you press a button, the first thing, the active state, not the hover state, I'm going to give it a little padding, additional padding. So this was previously impossible to do with Unity's system. So I'm going to give the padding left of like 6 pixels, and I'm going to give, just to equal it out, I'm going to give the padding right of 4 pixels, and the padding top of 6 pixels, and the padding bottom of 4 pixels. So now when I click on it, you'll see this cool little indentation effect because I've changed the padding property, which, like I said, you could not change the padding property when clicking on something in Unity. Now I'm going to go ahead and give it a hover state, because hover states are nice too. And the hover state's just going to change, just going to lighten up the background a little bit to 7, and give the border 2 pixels, and then 5. So
Very
now you
nice.
see we have a fairly interactive system.
So then with the power of hover, could you do something like tell the columns to all change as well?
Yeah, because of the nature of CSS, you can do stuff where you can say, give me everything that matches this selector, but only if one of the particular elements is hovered over or is active or something like that. And I can demonstrate that really easily by, inside my column style, I can go ahead and say, do the same thing and hover. And I can go ahead and give it whatever I want. In this case, I'm going to give it a background of white. So now you see as I hover over this, the background of the column turns white. Of course, if you did have a white texture, you could do this in Unity, but what you couldn't do is this. Now you notice that when I hover over, these column headers disappear because they're now the same color as my background color. But what if I wanted to go ahead and say, when the column is hovered over, select all of the H2s, and I'm going to do that right here by giving them a black color. So now you see that we are changing the styles of the children of this column only when the mouse is over the column.
Very nice.
So we already have a large degree of interactivity without, doing a whole lot extra stuff. And just the readability of this compared to the amount of work that I would have had to do to make this into a GUI skin, even a simple UI like this, is just crazy.
What about if we wanted to change the fonts up to something nice looking?
Yeah, that's also supported. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize out of that so I can get access to my project. And I'm going to go ahead and drop in a font into my resources folder. Any fonts that you do want to use, you're going to have to add them to a resources folder. So I'm going to copy out the name, go back to my editor, and let's go ahead and give all of our headers a different font. So I'm going to say select all H1s and select all H2s and give them a font of that.
Nice.
So now you see it instantly updated with the new font.
Outstanding.
CGS supports every single property that you can set in Unity, as well as a few additional ones such as background and border. In addition, the error reporting is also as helpful as I could get it. It won't crash your system if you have a syntax error. For example, if you go ahead and nuke this semicolon on line 8, you'll see down on my console, you'll see error parser mismatched input colon expected semi, and it'll also give me a line number, which is really cool. If I missed a open curly, we'll get another error or a few errors, but eventually you will see that on line 5 is where it started. So it's easy to track down errors. In addition to that, if you were to give invalid input to a particular property, such as background, if I were to say, okay, make the background that, and Control S, you'll see invalid input to background, expected name color, because it's thinking that this is a name color because it's an identifier. And then, if you were to give a resource to a padding, it's going to tell you invalid input to padding, and then it's going to give you exactly what it expects, all the different formats of padding that it supports. So the error handling is very helpful and fairly robust.
Very cool. So anything else with this basic Hello World example that you wanted to throw out there?
No, this pretty much covers all of the major features and some of the cool stuff you can do with it now.
Okay, so how about this? We've got RuneSlinger. And RuneSlinger now is all put together using CGS. One of the things that is required when you launch RuneSlinger when playing in multiplayer mode is, of course, logging into the server. So there's an authentication screen. Could you demonstrate now something that's much more practical instead of doing this little Hello World demo? Just put together a real game screen.
Yeah. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and nuke out all these styles.
Bye-bye, styles.
And
that's all we have. Okay.
Which is always cool. When I was because I'm a web developer, or was for a very long time, it was always cool to see what happened when you took out your style sheet. Just the power of that sort of syntax. Mm-hmm. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop over some textures because I'm cheating. So I already have all these textures set up from the game.
Sure. I mean, when putting together a game, obviously you're going to have your artist that's going to be putting together these textures.
Yeah. So, like all HTML and CSS and then CGS projects, you're going to start out with your structure. And the structure for this is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to start off with a vdiv, and we're going to give it a class of dialog, and we're going to give it an ID of login window. Just this concept is very powerful because we can go ahead and style every single dialog in our application in a particular way, and then we can override it for the ID of login window for a login window specific things. Then I'm going to go ahead and give another vdiv with a class of frame. Then I'm going to give another vdiv with a class of window. Now this is where my fields are going to go. So I'm going to start off with a label for email. I'm going to give this label a class of email so I can, this is another powerful thing, I will be able to select every single email property that I want, or email label that I want. Then I'm going to put in a g.text, and g.text expects a kind of interesting signature, which is a little bit different than the way Unity does it right now. Just to make things easier, instead of doing, text equals GUI.text text, what you can do is just pass a reference to a string in here. So I'm going to start off with creating my two private fields that are going to contain the values of these text boxes. And then I'm going to pass in a reference to which one I want it to edit. So I want it to edit the email one. Then, of course, I'm going to give it a class of email as well. I'm going to do the same thing for password. And I'm going to use the g.password method and give it a ref of password and give it a class of password. Finally, underneath the window, we're going to add a button. And we're going to give it a text of login, even though that won't matter soon. And we're going to give it an ID of login button. Now, finally, I am going to cheat a little bit. And there's limitations of GUI layout that are very unfortunate. It's not a very powerful layout engine.
You are catching the fact that you're missing a terminator.
No, I wasn't actually catching that fact, but I am now, and it's fixed.
Cool.
And that didn't happen. So, there is an unfortunate thing about GUI layout, and it's not very powerful. It's a lot more powerful than the GUI methods, but it still has some limitations, particularly with absolutely positioning elements. So because I am basing this off of a layout engine that does not support a particular feature, I'm unfortunately have to resort back to GUI dot to do a few things that require absolute positioning. And what I mean is there's going to be a Slinger logo that's going to go over the dialog box, and there's no way to represent that with GUI layout. If I were to have access to a different layout engine that doesn't have that limitation, adding this into CGS would be very simple using the the position attribute of CSS and so on. But at the moment, I'm going to have to say GUI.drawTexture. And I'm going to have to pass in the texture that I want to draw. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say private texture header. And then in my wake method, I'm going to say header equals resources load. And then I'm going to load in dialog header. And of course, I have to give it a cast to texture. So now that I have the header loaded, I'm going to draw it and the positions first. And it's going to be positioned at 63, 65, and it's going to have a size of 691 pixels wide. 691, and a width of 100, or a height of 120, 92. And then pass in header. So this is actually all the structure we need. So if I jump back over to Unity and hit run, you'll see this. It's not very interesting. I think you can, I don't even think you can see the text boxes because they haven't been styled properly yet. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is turn all of these elements into something that looks good by just editing the style sheet. going to start off with
And
dialog.
do you want to go ahead and set that to maximize on play?
Yeah, good point. I actually am going to change the resolution of this as well,
Okay.
because this was designed for a particular resolution, and the textures don't tile. If they did, it wouldn't be a problem, but I'm going to go ahead and set this to 800 by 600, and hopefully that's enough room. Actually, I think that is enough room just as it is,
Cool.
or only just enough room. And then I'm going to hit run, and now we have the proper resolution for the textures that I have. So I'm going to start with dialog. Dialog is going to have a width of 100%, a height of 100%, and a background of a dialog background. Now, inside of a dialog, my N key doesn't work. My Enter key doesn't work. I'm in some sort of command mode. There we go. Inside of my dialog, I'm going to go ahead and style the frame. The frame is going to have a background of resource frame, a width of 100%, a height of 100%, and now you'll see the, sorry about that, that snuck in there somehow. Now you see the frame is now being represented or is now being stretched properly over the entire surface.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to go ahead and text the text and password elements. And I'm going to do this at the root so that it'll apply to all text and all password fields in this entire system. I'm going to give them background of 0 or black, padding of 5 pixels, a border of 1 pixel, and color 4, width of 100%. And so those look pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the hover state, which is just going to say change the border to 1 pixel A, and that's the wrong symbol, of course. And now I'm going to add the active state, which will have a border of 1 pixel and a light gray.
Very cool.
So now I'm going to go ahead and style the login window specifically. And in this particular case, because of the limitations of the layout system, I did have to use a lot of absolute position, or not absolute positioning, but hard-coded, fine or really tweaked numbers to get everything to position properly. But it's still not that bad. It's not the end of the world. So remember, login window is going to be the root of this entire dialog, and window is going to be a class, an element with the class of window inside of our login window parent. And we're going to give him a background of resources, login dialog, login dialog EG. And it's not resources, it's resource. And then we're going to give a margin of a bunch of magic numbers. 186 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 245 pixels. Then we're going to give him a padding of some more magic numbers. A padding of 35 pixels, 25 pixels, 0 pixels, 25 pixels. Now we're going to give him a width of 310 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. And that's not how you spell height. So it's looking pretty good already. Now we're going to go ahead and inside of our window, I want to style all of our labels in a particular way. Actually, I want to bring this style out into being applied to all labels in this project. And they're going to have a color of FFB940. It's a nice little yellow color. And then they're going to have a font of 18 points with the font that we have copied into our project. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that into my clipboard because I don't know how to spell that off the top of my head. And now we see that the font's being applied properly. We're going to give them a width of 100%. We're going to give them a text align of middle center, padding of 5 pixels, and a margin top of 10.
Sweet.
So yeah, that's shaping up really nicely. Now I'm going to go ahead and style our button. And remember, this is going to be the button that is a child of, sorry, it's not going to be a child of window because the button isn't a child of window. This is going to be a button that's going to be the child of the login window element. And we're going to give him a background of resource login button. We give him an image position of image only. Here's an example of a Unity property that doesn't exist in CSS, but it was added. Well, of course, I had to add custom properties to the CSS language to make this work. And then I'm going to go ahead and give it a border of none. This is just in case parent button styles gave it a border, which is very common. A width of 310, a height of 83, and a margin left of 245 pixels. And you'll see a nice login button up here right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and give it its active and hover states with a background, a resource login button over, and an active state. The background of resource login button pressed. So now you see we have some cool interactivity. Although there is a few additional things that we could do that would be really cool, just to demonstrate how easy it is to do things with CGS that aren't easy already with the GUI layout, which, I mean, I think I've already demonstrated, but there's one more cool thing that I think we can go ahead and do.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to our structure. And people who've worked with HTML and CSS will be very familiar with what I'm about to show. I'm going to give a private bool is invalid. Now this private bool is invalid is going to base, its goal is to track whether or not a login attempt was made and whether or not it was successful. So if invalid is false, that means that a login attempt hasn't been made or was successful. If is invalid is true, that means the login attempt was unsuccessful. Then on my button, I'm going to say if the button is pressed, set is invalid to true, just for demonstration purposes. Obviously, I would have some login logic right now, but right here, but I'm just going to short circuit it on the button level. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and in my window, I'm going to add something cool. I'm going to say if is invalid is true, then add the invalid class to this window. Otherwise, give it no additional class. So the syntax should look relatively straightforward. We're just adding an additional class if it is valid, if is invalid is true. So now let's go back to our Unity project and load it up. Make sure we don't get any errors. We can hit the button and so on. But I want to start actually with is invalid being false. So let's go back into our styles. And for our login window, we're going to say if the login window is invalid, I want to style our text and passwords fields a little bit different. I want to give them a border right of 5 pixels and red. So now if I go ahead and hit this button, you'll see that cool little border show up.
Nice.
So if you didn't see that, now it's an invalid state. Obviously, I could do more interesting things. I'm actually going to go back into my structure again and toggle is invalid. So then, like for example, I could do something like also style out a label and make a label with the color red, for example. So now you see when it's invalid, we get cool little style. When it's not invalid, it gets the normal style.
Okay. Awesome.
So that's something you can do where you can just, if the state of the GUI changes in some way, throw a class on a parent, and you can selectively style individual elements with your own custom styles.
Excellent. So this obviously makes, again, styling these GUIs fast and painless, correct?
Yep, and hopefully very familiar because CSS does have a wide adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said back at the beginning of this video, once Unity does move over to their new GUI system, it's just a matter of simply adapting this to work with it. And that should go quite quickly. Now, for those of you that are in the 3D Buzz MMO class, this will be the next thing that we're going to be putting together because obviously this will make everything that we are doing as far as GUI design in the MMO goes very easy. And there's a lot of very powerful stuff that we're going to be covering in the recording of these videos, showing you how to put together your own language. And that will become important to us later on also, as the MMO does have a language planned for it as well. That will be something for the hacker class. And we will be using the same techniques that we're going to be discussing as we put all of these videos together at a date a little bit later on. But Nelson, you do have planned, before we dive into actually creating this, you are going to give them a little bit of know-how for those that have never worked with lexical analysis and parsers before, right?
Yeah, because we are going to eventually use a tool to put together a parser and a lexer, but like all abstractions, you won't be able to easily debug that sort of tool without actually having the fundamental knowledge of how to parse these things by hand. And it's really not as scary as it sounds if you haven't done it before, and it's actually pretty fun. But we're going to go ahead and build, a basic parser by hand and see how that process goes, and that'll make actually building out this production system a lot easier to understand.
Cool. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this basic demo. Nelson, thank you very much for taking the time to show this to everyone. And for those of you that have any questions, just shoot us a question over on 3D Buzz in the lounge or a PM. And for those of you in the MMO class, keep an eye in the videos area and for an announcement as these videos begin rolling out. So that will conclude this video. Thank you all very much.